Hello there, my RPG lovers, and welcome to another video. Hot naked girls.
Why not stay a while?
Huge muscular main character, almost as big as your boy. Brutal combat where you can cut off limbs in various ways. Pull out the guts of your enemies. Enter the mouth of a big monster only to come out straight off its guy, and so on. Conan was certainly one of the most brutal action adventures that you could play back in the day, and it's mostly forgotten nowadays, sadly.
You dare speak to me this way?
It's just not as good as God of War. That was one of the main critiques for the game, from the critics at least.
Then the hell with you!
Although it seems like critics and the user agreed on the average game score for Conan, which is quite rare nowadays. Conan was a very pleasant surprise for me. My expectations for these movie-based games is always very low, and you can't blame me for that. They can be mediocre at best and very bad at worst.
Excellent work, Blade. It seems that you're in good shape after all.
There are some exceptions, of course, like a couple of early Harry Potter and Lord of the Rings games, which I actually covered in other videos. But for every good or a decent movie-based game, you can find at least 5 bad ones, which sole purpose was to hype up the movie itself. I think these games usually don't have a lot of development time and a very strict deadline, so these studios had to perform miracles. I will have another video with some bad movie-based games, but this one is a little bit different. Conan is a hack-and-slash action adventure released in 2007 for PlayStation 3 and Xbox 360 by Nihilistic Software. I played this game with Emulator, which is not perfect because it had some annoying visual glitches. If you can ignore that, you can make the game run in 60 FPS and high resolutions, and that was never possible on PlayStation 3 or Xbox 360, obviously. But my dumb ass forgot to tweak this little setting and make the game run in 60 FPS all the way until the very end of the game. Yeah, I wasn't that bothered with 30 FPS while I was playing, but when I tweaked that setting, I wanted to replay the whole game because it feels so much better. If you're going to play this game with emulation, just make sure to tick this setting to 120. Putting that aside, Conan offers a very satisfying action-adventure campaign with a brutal combat system and a very simple story. The whole main story revolves around Conan trying to recover his armor set piece by piece, which is done by visiting different locations and killing different bosses. You need to stop Black Death, which Conan released in the beginning of the game. There are only a handful of actual characters that have something to say, like Akana, who joins Conan early on and also helps him a little bit in later levels. She also helps him in other ways as well, you know.
We have time to kill before we reach those shores, barbarian.
Speaking of which, there are many naked women that needs to be rescued, and their mood switches real quick when you do it.
Take me and crush me with your love.
There is not really much to say about this story besides that, but you're going to have a lot of cutscenes where Conan interacts with Akana and bosses, which brings us to the visuals. The graphics in Conan have not aged very well, but it still has some very cool effects. The bosses and enemies in general still look very cool, as well as the visual effects for dismembering NPCs. The character models on the other hand have a bit more realistic style, which never ages that well. Conan has some similarities with Arnold from the movie, but not a lot to be honest.
Then the hell with you!
I'm not sure if that's because of the movie copyright or whatever, but I would definitely prefer if Conan looked a bit more like Arnold's. He is voiced by Ron Perlman, a great actor that you probably watched in movies like Hellboy, Blade 2 and many other movies and TV shows. I think he did a decent job with voicing Conan in this game.
I'll help you. But only because it's my bloody armor. I'll not have some wizard using it as his own.
On the other side, the voice actress for Akana was not very good to be honest. She had a very mediocre performance.
The Black Death has infected these shores. Every man here is doomed. If you want to live, you'll come with me.
Come with me if you want to live.
Claudia Black is a very talented voice actress that had many great roles in other games like Uncharted, Dragon Age, etc., but this was certainly one of her worst performances. However, the narrator for the game did a very good job in general.
What manner of devilry is this?
The monster had been wearing Conan's own gauntlet, the one lost to him in Balmoria. Now it had returned, and it had a tale to tell.
There is a very good amount of visual variety when it comes to different levels. It keeps the game looking fresh from the beginning to the very end. Now let's talk about the actual gameplay. Conan has a very good hack and slash action combat where you can learn various combos with different weapon types. It's obvious that the most development effort went into making this combat system look and feel very brutal, as it should, because we're talking about freaking Conan the Barbarian. Controlling Conan is very snappy and responsive. You have light and heavy attacks with all weapon types, and your right thumbstick is used to dodge in 4 different directions. A move that you're going to use quite a bit to avoid attacks, or even prepare your next combo a bit faster. You see, at the end of each combo there is a quite long animation lock which can get you hit easily. But you can dodge right away and break that animation lock, which also allows you to start another combo straight away. There's a nice little tip for you if you decide to try this game out. Another combat move that you get by default is the ability to parry attacks if your timing for block is on point. This enables you to execute enemies with very creative and silly animations depending on the weapon type. You can learn more ways to execute enemies within the combo system. Speaking of which, you start off with some simple button mashing combos which can be equally effective, if not even better than some specific longer combos that you can learn. However, the combos are certainly worth learning and using in combat because they can deal some very good damage. Even shorter combos that send smaller enemies flying or stunned are worth using, which becomes very useful in mid and late game. The way you learn these combos is by spending experience points. You get these red points by killing enemies, opening chests and rescuing naked ladies. There is an impressive amount of different combos to learn for all weapon types in the game. It's kinda crazy. You can play with one-handed sword, sword and board, dual wield or two-handed weapons. All of these fighting styles have unique combos to learn with unique animations and cool effects. You can cut enemies in half with two-handed weapons, cut off heads with stronger combos for dual wield, or just dismember NPCs through regular combat moves. Even the ragdolls are pretty good, and some combos allow you to throw enemies around and impale them on things. Most games from this time period would make such actions a bit more scripted, but it seems like Conan mostly uses actual ragdoll physics. It's very satisfying. We could have a whole segment about many different ways to cut enemies in half. It really makes the combat so much better and more impactful. At first, I thought that Conan is going to be a very mindless hack and slash game where combos are not even worth using. Granted, you can still try to button mash, and if you unlock the finishers for button mash combos, that can be all you need in a lot of situations. But like I said before, when you successfully perform some longer combos, they deal very high amounts of damage, or even execute smaller enemies instantly. I found some longer combos useful even in boss fights, but your timing has to be pretty good, otherwise you're going to get interrupted. I was playing the game on hard, and I think this difficulty is well balanced for the most part. The AI can be brain dead sometimes, but when they work as intended, they can easily kill you if you're not careful. A lot of NPCs in crowded fights just stand there like morons, but I don't think the game lacks difficulty in general. I had more than a couple of difficulty spikes on specific levels, but it's not exactly an extremely hard game in general, even on hard difficulty. That being said, I think there is a very decent amount of different enemy types, even though it doesn't seem like that at first. Most regular NPCs start using almost the same combos that you have, and elite NPCs have unique powers that can do some serious damage to you. Some elite enemies like these gorillas have annoying attacks that can stun lock you, so you have to be careful. Same goes for some special attacks from regular enemies, but you can't really complain about this because you have so many different ways of dealing with enemies. In other words, everything goes well until it doesn't, so you have to reset, move back a little bit and start performing your combos. That's probably the simplest way of describing the combat mechanics in Conan.
My blade thirsts.
My problem with many similar games that are heavy on the combo system is how the combos are usually not necessary and pointless. That's because you can beat a lot of these games by relentlessly button mashing the same combination, so learning new combos is not very compelling. Even though a lot of combat scenarios in combat can be resolved in a similar manner, it's still very fun to learn combos because they deal some massive damage. And more importantly, it's not that annoying to try and execute these combos. I focused a lot on dual wielding playstyle because it has some really fun moves, but now I wish I invested more points into two-handed weapons. You need to collect a lot of experience points to unlock some of these powerful combos. You also need to unlock some simple combos before you get to the stronger ones. Only at the end, I unlocked some great combos for two-handed weapons which deal massive damage. Two-handed weapons are very slow, so it can be easy to lose your composure and get hit or even killed. You can pick up all weapons from enemies, throw them for some minor damage, and Conan will always put his default sword on his back when you pick up something else. You always start the level with the default swords, but as soon as you kill at least one enemy, you can pick up their weapon. I didn't even mention how you can use the environment to your advantage, except the ragdoll physics parts. There are many different objects you can pick up and throw at enemies, use the fire to burn them, and so on. Some levels can be beaten by just throwing everything you can find on the map without thinking too much. It's fun to throw things around in this game because everything breaks in a satisfying way. On top of the combo system, you have some special powers to unlock, which use the blue resource that you can collect by killing enemies and smashing some objects. Every new power that you unlock requires more mana to be used, and they are very powerful in general. The strongest ability can wipe out all enemies on the screen in a couple of seconds, but even the weakest ability is very useful. I was being a huge dumbass by ignoring these little signs you can find on the grounds. You have red and blue signs and a certain amount of time to find a couple of more signs after you activated the previous one. I totally forgot that this is what increases your health and mana, so I beat the whole game with a huge handicap basically. You can see that my health is very low, although I did get a couple of the blue ones for mana later in the game. Like the majority of action games from this time period, Conan has a lot of quick time events. But this is a rare occasion where QTEs are done very well, and I would even say they enhance the gameplay in some situations. They are not extremely frustrating and punishing like in some other games, but you still need to pay attention when they pop up. Activities like opening doors, pulling and pushing things around have these little QTE segments with unique animations. I can't believe that I'm actually talking positive about QTEs, but there you go.
I'll do as I please, woman.
What's interesting about some levels, you can even skip a lot of enemies, as long as you successfully push or pull something to progress forwards. Conan also has some light platforming segments where you need to jump to some platforms and avoid getting hit by something. These are usually very basic, and the platforming definitely feels kinda janky, but it's serviceable. I think Nihilistic did a good job with a variety of these platforming segments, as well as the very light puzzle solving on some levels. You'll get to fire big ballistas, burn things, sink ships, and do some more crazy QTEs in boss fights. Yeah, about those, I think the boss fights are pretty decent overall, especially with the presentation. Sure, it's not God of War, but the presentation is still very good in general. Even the fights themselves are not just gimmicky QTEs. I mean, each and every boss has a QTE segment, but they also have regular boss mechanics as well. You'll need to do some regular damage with your combos in order to kill them, and all of them have at least a couple of different phases. What's not so good about these phases is that some of them are just the exact copy of the first phase, but you only need to do another QTE event from the other side of the map, which will be perfectly fine if the boss doesn't constantly heal itself to the max every time this happens. It feels very cheap, but some bosses are better than others. I was very surprised to find out that even the default autosave feature in the game will save on different boss stages if you die. But I will still make regular save states in the emulator just in case. A couple of boss fights are pretty long because they have up to 3 different phases, although some of them are very underwhelming. I did die more than a couple of times on every boss fight, but once you figure out what to do, they become pretty easy. Like I said before, the presentation makes these fights even better than they actually are. Although even just in general, the boss fights in Conan are quite solid, considering this is an action-adventure game from 2007, where many studios were struggling with QTEs and making these games as cinematic as possible, at the cost of diminishing the actual combat mechanics in some cases. The dragon boss fight is kinda crazy with the presentation and different phases it has, even though it's a bit annoying. As for some random cool mechanics, when you get hit by arrows, you have to pull them out, so your pull-out game has to be strong. We have to mention the music as well, which is very good, and it gives the game a great atmosphere.
My blade thirsts.
Overall, I would definitely consider Conan as a hidden gem from 2007, which deserves a remaster or remake.
You're a brave man.
That's probably never going to happen because Nihilistic closed down long time ago, but I'm pretty sure THQ Nordic owns this IP now. If done properly, I think this remake would do very good today. I would heavily recommend trying this game out today, whether through emulation or on Xbox, or if you have a PlayStation 3 lying around somewhere. It's a blast from the past in the best way possible. Tell me, did you play Conan before and did you like it? Leave a comment down below. Be sure to subscribe if you enjoyed the video. You can also support me by becoming a YouTube member or a Patreon. I also have some cool t-shirts and hoodies in the theme of the channel, so check that out as well. Huge thanks to all of my current supporters, and I'll see you in the next one.